Hello friendos! So, over the race lore video series, I have omitted quite a bit of lore stuff that I couldn't figure out how to fit into the videos, or, especially in the earlier videos such as the Lala and Miqo'te video, I wanted to mostly be making jokes and it wasn't really intended for actual lore. But as I kept making more and more videos, I kept adding more and more real lore, and so I thought I was going to maybe remake those videos, but they were mostly going to be the same and I don't think it would have been that interesting. So instead I thought I'll just take one massive dump of lore and make it a low casual edit video, because my time is short and even my little crap edits take a while to make. Well, yeah, let's get started. Let's go over them in the order of the videos I made them, starting with the potatoes, also known as the Lalafells. So if you've watched the Lalafell video, you'll see it's very different from the rest, because originally my plan was to make the series like Steve Irwin's Crocodile Hunter, and the races were different animals we're looking at. So the video's a bit odd, but it didn't have any real lore, so consider this entire section the Lalafell lore videos. So let's get started. Funny enough, unlike how we players treat them, the Lalafell in lore actually have very little discrimination pointed towards them. This is because they're insanely good at making friends. Due to their generally friendly nature, they're normally relaxed, carefree, and really happy people. Now of course, this isn't always the case, see Teleji Adeleji, but for the most part, Lalafell are just people you like to be around. They are unsurprisingly not physically strong, but are shockingly agile and deceptively fast. You'd think this round, rotund Lalafell is gonna be slogging around slowly. No, these guys are fast. Due to this, many people have actually died underestimating Lalafell in combat. Lalafell are also insanely good mages, and have invented many of the jobs we use, such as Scholar being invented by the nation of Nim, which was majority plainsfolk, Black Mage being invented by the nation of Machach, MHACH, was also majority potato. The potatoes are one of the races that very quickly adopted to the Hyur language. They did this because they are a race of traders. They're naturally gifted to work with money, and they really like making money, so talking the language that everyone trades in, just something they want to do. Let's go over the two clans. Let's start with the plainsfolk. So, I made a lot of jokes that Lalafells are food, and the developers actually do this too in the game, but this is, funny enough, actually a lore thing. There is actually a single sentence in their
Encyclopedia Eorzea
description that makes it clear that Lalafell, or at least the plainsfolk Lalafell, were in fact at some point during their existence food. Once again, Lalafell is food. Anywho, more fun Lala facts. All Lalafells originate from the Southern Isles, with their native home buildings being that of straw huts. The buildings of Costa de Sol are actually traditional Lalafell styled buildings. They're just kind of raised into the air instead of on the ground. Now, I'm assuming their houses wouldn't be raised up and would normally be on the ground on their home island, because the Lalafells also have massive underground tunnel networks that would connect all their houses and communities together, which they would safely travel in, for protection against aerial predators. Probably. I added that last bit. Due to the subterranean living, the plainsfolk make excellent miners. It also helps so they can squeeze into really tight areas that other races can't get to. The plainsfolk are also known as being very good farmers, some of the best in all of Eorzea. They traditionally lived a very agrarian lifestyle and didn't do much hunting. When they finally left for Eorzea, they took this lifestyle with them, and many farms popped up around Limsa Lominsa as a result. Though it should be noted that the Lalafell did come to Eorzea well before Limsa Lominsa existed. First appearing on Vilbrant in the 5th Astral Era, they created the port city of Nim. This eventually grew to a great city-state, and, as described earlier, this is where they created the Scholar. Later in the era, War of the Magi, following Calamity, Nim destroyed, bad spoilery scholar story stuff happening in Nim. Those that didn't have spoilery things happen to them normally fled back to the Southern Sea Isles. Later the Plainsfolk returned again, following trade routes and profit, mostly arriving in Limsa Lominsa, and these are the ancestors of the Plainsfolk we know today. Now for the Dunes folk. Originally, the Dunes folk are also from the Southern Sea Isles, but back then, Dunes folk didn't actually exist. Lalafell were just a single people. They only split much later into their own clan. The Dunes folk history is traced back to the Lalafell who arrived in Eorzea, but these were the Lalafell that founded the nation of Man. History and fall of this nation is super important to the history of the Dunes folk. So this nation was where the incredibly powerful Taru mage Shantoto created black magic. Now, Taru were a playable race in Final Fantasy XI and are apparently the ancient ancestors of the Lalafell, at least according to the Taru and Shantoto minions. Anywho, the people of this nation went a little power crazy due to their mastery over the void, and believed their nation superior to all others. So, naturally, as nations like that want to do, they try to take over and subjugate all other nations. The two other major nations at the time being Ampthifor, where white magic was created, and of course, Nim. We won't go over the War of the Magi, so long story short, war, calamity, death, destruction, era ends. After the calamity, the people who survived were not very friendly to the Magi, especially those from since they were blamed for the war and the following calamity. So those survivors of fled into the wastelands on the very outskirts of society and roamed it as nomads. This wasteland being the Great Scorching Sands of Fanalan. As time passed, memories faded into history and legend, and these people developed their Dunesfolk appearance. Eventually, they decided to settle and used magic to force underground water channels to the surface, and founded the nation of Beladir, which then had a little civil war as Silda and Uldar, the former being destroyed. Here's a fun fact about Dunesfolk. Dunesfolk will often feed their children tea infused with small amounts of venom and poison, upping the doses until they become immune to it. So Dunesfolk who live in traditional household, like how a certain sultana would have, are supposed to be remarkably resistant to poisons. Or you'd think so, but apparently something strange about Eorzean toxicology is different from everywhere else, and you can't build immunity to it, because that would be ridiculously overpowered if you were immune to poisons. Alright, that's it for the Lalafell. Let's move on to the Miqo'te. The Miqo'te also technically migrated to Eorzea twice. The first migration happened before or during the power of the Allegan Empire. But I'm pretty sure the Allegans were dog people, because they very quickly displaced the Miqo'te and forced them to live in the far reaches of Ilsabard. Those Miqo'te that didn't like being displaced fled to Mercidia, which is a continent south of Eorzea. We know that the Miqo'te in Eorzea today are from this area, as is shown in the description of the sesame seeds. Though we're not sure if they're actually originally from here, or if this is just where they fled to get away from the Allegan Empire. Mercidia being one of the very few areas that the Allegan Empire was never able to conquer, so a really good place to go to get away from them. They then returned to Eorzea during the 5th Umbral era. In lore, Miqo'te are very traditional, and more often than not will stick to their cultural ways, which is one of the lore reasons they're supposed to be kinda rare. Now, obviously this isn't the case because, you know, Catgirl? But we're talking about lore here. Basically, their traditional territorial nature and adherence to freedom, clash with their idea of living in a huge city. Those pesky laws and alliances just don't mesh with how they like living. The reason the Miqo'te first learnt the common Hyur language was solely to barter for goods, to craft better hunting tools and weapons. The traditional Miqo'te craftsmanship is kind of Think of it as they were still using iron weapons while the other races had moved on to steel, so it just makes sense to trade for better stuff. So, fun fact about the Miqo'te clans. Miqo'te see heterochromia, this is when you have two different eye colors, as a good sign. That is, that Miqo'te will be very lucky in their life. It's also a trait that is relatively quite common in the Miqo'te. So, let's talk about their clans. Let's do the Sun Kitties first. Sun Kitties culture is male dominated, and the males who have clans have large harems they mate with. The Sun Kitties are generally quick-witted, prone to action, and bore very easily. They just can't sit still. A small number of Sun Kitties live in Limsa Leminza, but these kitties are descendant of Miqo'te who were forced into service on pirate ships. You know, them Roegadyns at it again, just stealing people. So, a bit about Sun Kitty naming that I didn't go over in my original video. There's actually a few additional quirks that could happen with male kitty names. Females effectively stay in the tribe, go hunt, defend, make kitties, and the males are the ones that create and expand their existing tribes. When a male is either unable or unwilling, for whatever reason, in defeating their own tribe's Nun and take over to become one of two things happens. 1. The male leaves the tribe and creates a new one. If they do this, they lose the symbolic first letter of their name that denotes which tribe they're in. But there's only 26 letters in the alphabet, and there's already 26 tribes, so what happens with this new tribe's name? Well, they use 2 letters in the formation of the new tribe. So if a Miqo'te that left the tribe is called Raha, he can now become Fur Raha or Bur Raha or whatever 2 letters he likes. However, these new tribes that are formed, 99.9% of the times is just a tribe of that single Miqo'te and die out when that Miqo'te eventually dies. This is because it is pretty much impossible for them to find a female who will abandon her tribe to join him. The reason is that Miqo'te who abandon their tribe are, well, expelled from their tribe and lose that entire support network. They also need to find a new territory because they are no longer welcomed in their tribe's territory. And finding this as a single Miqo'te is pretty dang difficult. The second thing that happens, and is the far more likely result, is that the male will strike out and find a new land and claim it for his tribe. If this land is already owned by another tribe, he, as well as a bunch of females, would fight for this area to take over the land. If this male is able to hold this area for a while, he will become the Nun of his tribe in that area. So, technically the same tribe, but just 2 different outposts, I suppose. Since they're the same tribe, females will move between the 2 tribal lands to hunt and mate with the Nuns. Doing all this will expand their tribe's power and influence. All of this makes it sound like the Nun is a powerful and great leader of their tribe. But fun fact, no. They're just the breeding boys and the ones who defend their girls from other horny boys who want to breed. Some of the Nuns do actually lead their people, but more often than not, leadership falls to another Miqo'te, generally one of the females. Let's move on to the Moon Kitties. These kitties are generally very broody and edgy, but also quite tenacious. Their culture revolves entirely around families. Well, sort of. It revolves around a mother figure and her children. Moon Kitties often have 2 to 3 families working together to defend a territory and hunt. So, generally, 2 to 3 breeding females. Male Moon Kitties live alone. They go about as wanderers. mating with any females that are willing that they come across. Female moon kitties see males as annoyingly complex sperm dispensers. They mate with a male when they want children, and then, when they're certain they're pregnant, they want them gone because they have served their only purpose. And this generally happens. The male moves on and finds another female to mate with. This is kinda similar to Viera, except the female moon kitties still raise the male kitties that are born. And these male kitties only leave the tribe when they're of age and they're certain he can defend for himself, as there needs to be males because you need them for the poonin'. I did mention how the moon kitties were poachers in the Black Shroud. And yes, this is still true for many of the moon kitties. But today in Eorzea, a huge chunk of them also now abide by the Gradanian Trappers Guild guidelines. Thus, they hunt legally and are left alone. Those that don't follow the Gradanian rules, well, they don't exactly have a good time when the wood whalers find them. So here's one little fun moon kitty lore tidbit. Moon kitties often apply face paint just before they're going on hunts. This is to symbolize that they're ready to kill and also ready to serve as warriors for their gods should they die in the hunt. Alright, moving on, Viera. Overall, I'm actually very happy with this video. There wasn't much lore on Viera from Final Fantasy XIV specifically, and nearly everything we know about them comes either from Fran in the Stormblood 24-person raids, or from the Wandering Dramaturge. Beyond that, not much I could add, except Viera are the rarest of all races, at least according to the lore. They are extremely few in number. So few that many wealthy people and people of the upper class would actually pay money just to be seen next to a Viera because they're just that exotic. Beyond that, most of what we know about the Final Fantasy XIV Viera is in the video. Alright, Aura time. Let's get straight into the clans, so starting with Rain. When the Rain first left their ancestral homeland of the Azim Steppe, they were first met with hatred and hostility from the other races. Thus, they had to defend themselves, and did so surprisingly well. So well, in fact, that a Yanxian warlord was very impressed with them, and offered them positions as his retainers and warriors, an offer that many of them accepted, becoming amazing warriors and legendary status samurai. A very interesting and kind of important bit of Rain culture that I didn't touch on. So as we know, they're originally from the Azim Steppe, and the Zayla show the original traditions of the Aura. So you'd think the Rain are somewhat similar? Nope. They are entirely and fully assimilated into the culture of Doma and Hingashi. So really anything Doman and Hingashi is also part of Rain Aura culture. This integration also means that many of them don't believe in their historical gods of Azim and Nama anymore. They generally believe in Kami, like all the other people of Doma and Hingashi do. There are actually some who do believe in their ancestral gods, but they are the exception and very few. Generally, those who do believe in their ancestral gods return to the Azim Steppe and are accepted into the Malagud tribe. Now for the Zayla. Really not much to say about the Zayla. Pretty much everything from them is in the video. I do have one correction though, and it was a mistake I made and I apologize for that. I mentioned that some of the Zayla who moved to Eorzea got completely butchered by Ishgard, and I said this was long ago. This was a mistake. It was only roughly 15 years before the events of the game started, so a bit ago, but many Ishgardians might actually know about this massacre. Also, I didn't mention that this was actually a single tribe, and the reason they left for Eorzea is to flee the Garlean occupation. This single tribe was nearly all butchered, and there was only one survivor. This tribe was the Oral tribe. Now, I'm pretty sure that makes it obvious who that one survivor was, and it shaped him to the man he is today. Oh, I guess there's one other interesting lore thing about the Zayla. Zayla still speak their traditional Aura language. There's actually a good chunk of them that don't speak the common Hyur, or I guess in their case, Domin, because, well, many of the Zayla see outsiders as enemies and threats, and thus they don't really have a reason to know the language. But, of course, many Zayla did learn the common language, because trade is good, and there are tribes that thrive on trade. Alright, Roegadyn. A bit of a correction in the where they came from section. The Roegadyn do believe that all life comes from the island of Negin, but I made a mistake as to where it is. This island is not a part of Eersland, which is where I thought it was. Negin is actually over here. There's also another two clans of Roegadyn that I didn't touch on. These are the Ilsabadian Roegadyn and the Far East Roegadyn. So let's quickly touch on them now. Ilsabadian Roegadyn. These guys resemble either the Seawolf or the Hell's Guard, but they aren't either of them. These guys were conquered by the Garlean Empire, and many of them now serve the Garlean Empire as soldiers. There are two major ones that we interact with. There's Greinevald Pier Arvina and Ritatin Sas Arvina. Alright, most of you guys probably forgot this guy exists, suppressing the memory of him deep into your subconscious. He's a very difficult fight, and many people struggle to overcome this boss. So I thought I'd make a quick guide on how to do this fight. Just hit him, and he's dead. The Far Eastern Roegadyn mostly look like Hellsguard Roegadyn. Gorsetsu is, of course, one of these Roegadyn. Also, I don't think I made this very clear in the video, but when I said Roegadyn value strength above everything, this doesn't just mean physical strength. If you're able to display magical prowess, they would consider that a strength. And if you're not strong, traditional Roegadyn wouldn't consider you worth attention or their time. You'd actually have to pay for their attention. Seawolf time. So, not much to add to them. I guess I could mention how the Seawolves really love wine and ale. You'll very often find Seawolves in bars and alehouses, being Vikings, spinning stories, and going Yahar, because they're also stereotypical pirates. They're described as quite loud people, and their booming voices often fill the air as they joke and laugh. They're known to have a very good sense of humor and tell good jokes. Seawolves also, very unsurprisingly, love fish and anything you can get from the ocean. They're known to create a wide range of cured food so that they can go on long ocean voyages, which makes sense because seawolves very often go on long ocean voyages. Moving on to the Hyur. So the Hyur were actually in Eorzea since the first Astral Era, but were just sort of there. Their population was quite small, but they've always been a part of every culture and every city-state. The big deal for the Hyur was these huge migrations. So let's start with the Midlanders. So there's one thing I didn't emphasize as much as I should have in the video, and I made it sound like it was just another thing, and that is their adaptability and drive for knowledge. It cannot be understated how important this is to the Hyur, especially to the Midlanders. Yeah, I should have been more clear on that, so I'll make it clear here. The Hyur adaptability is second to none. The Hyur established themselves in a wide array of disciplines and industries, and they don't care for tradition or heredity. If a field interests them, they will go into that field, and if it interests them a lot, they go at it hard, near consuming them. Other races often view this part of the Hyur mindset as overzealous, too consuming, and unprincipled, but this part of the Hyur mindset has led to numerous advancements in technology, knowledge, and ideas. The Hyurs have become the largest driving force behind the rapid spread of knowledge in Eorzea. These two reasons, adaptability and incredible drive for knowledge, is the reason such an otherwise unremarkable race was able to win wars and become the largest race in Eorzea. They can easily adapt and adjust to enemy army actions, so fighting against them is nearly always an uphill battle. And if a Hyur loves, say, being a pugilist or a warrior or whatever, that'll become a huge part of their mindset and drive. They'd be training a lot more than others would because, well, that's just what a Hyur does. So a Hyur doesn't have the natural gifts and talents that many of the other races do in select fields, but that doesn't matter because the Hyur's drive is so insane that they will train the hell out of it, becoming either just as good as the other races, or nearly always the second best at it. Also, there's one thing mentioned about the Midlanders in the Encyclopedia Eorzea that, to my knowledge, is never brought up again or mentioned anywhere else, and that is that Midlanders are extremely adept at teleportation magic, and is apparently one of the main reasons they were highly sought after in early adventuring parties. Now, Aetherites are teleportation magic, though this is pure speculation, but perhaps the Midlanders invented the Aethernet, maybe brought it with them during their massive migration. This would explain as to how so many of them from all over the show appeared, and this would be an insanely useful tool that they have over the other races. Don't know though, this is fun speculation, and as far as I know, we don't know who made the Aethernet. Now for the Highlanders. So I feel like I should make this clear. The part about Anselm Cotter requiring all Highlander males to shave their eyebrows was a joke. The real lore reason is, in my opinion, really silly, so I kinda wish my joke was true, because it takes that silly just over the top. The real lore reason is it's just to make themselves look scarier. That's it. No deeper reason. They just wanna look spooky. Now, I suppose if you look at the entire idea of what Highlander aesthetics are, it does kinda make sense. Highlanders like to look spooky, intimidating, and scary. 1, they shave their eyebrows. 2, they would very often cut themselves and intentionally let the wounds heal poorly. This is to ensure scarring. And 3, they have an ancient practice that some of them still do today of filing down their teeth into sharp points. You can't select this, nor is it shown anywhere in the game, but it is written into their lore. Basically, Highlanders' idea of aesthetics is, can I look even more intimidating? This idea, funny enough, even goes as far into their traditional food choices. They eat very basically, but often eat quite an impressive amount of food. Like, a traditional Highlander meal would be, you'd take a massive steak, you'd stick it on the end of your sword and you'd sear it over an open fire like a caveman. But for the Highlander, overcooking a meal is considered taboo. So much so that very often they would almost immediately remove the steak from the fire and eat it pretty much raw. And let's go on to the Hrothgar. I'm actually very happy with this video. Everything I wanted in the video is in the video. It has a good amount of jokes, and yeah, I like this one. I guess there is one thing I can add. Hrothgar are not the Final Fantasy X Ronso. Yeah, they're called Ronso on the first, and they're modeled after the Ronso, but their culture is entirely different. I've never played Final Fantasy X, but I did a little bit of research on them, and from what I gathered, the Ronso in 10 value their horns highly, and for it to break is shameful. The Ronso female aren't rare, nor do they hold any special position in their culture, and the Ronso in 10 live in a mountainous region, and this mountain is sacred to them. This is all very different from the Hrothgar. Most Hrothgar don't even have horns, and those who do, it's just another thing. Nothing special. Their females are incredibly important to their culture revolving around them. And as we've gone over, yes, they did live in a mountainous region, but this mountain isn't sacred. It's just where they happen to live. Finally, the Elezen. This one is very much like the Hrothgar, and I'm very happy with the lore I got into it. There's not much I can add. There's only really one fun tidbit of lore I didn't include in there, and that is about the Elezen eyesight and Elezen hearing. The Wildwood Elezen are known to have the best eyesight of any race, being described as being as good as a hawk's eye. So they're able to spot and distance objects with frightening accuracy from pretty good distances. The Duskrite Elezen, on the other hand, have amazing hearing. They're able to pinpoint the exact source of a sound and can even hear the squeak of a mouse in an open field. It's described almost as echolocation. They're also described as excellent thieves and excellent fist fighters because they have an uncanny awareness of where things are in their environment, even if it isn't in their direct line of sight. And there we have it. All the corrections, fun lore stuff I didn't add in, and the actual lore for the earlier videos I made. But for now, goodbye my friends, and have a great day.
Bum, bum, bum.